If you were looking for an instructional video showing you how to replace the spark plugs on a 2015 Honda CR-V, then stay tuned because today that's what we're going to be doing. Hey YouTube, what is going on? Brandon here with Brandon DIY, and today I'm going to be swapping out the spark plugs on my new 2015 Honda CR-V. I recently purchased this vehicle, and so I have reason to believe that the spark plugs need to be changed at this point. Because you need to change them roughly every 30,000 miles. Now, I'm not a mechanic. I don't claim to be an expert in replacing spark plugs, but I have done this job in the past on previous vehicles. And so I feel very comfortable doing this replacement and sharing it with you because I have done it correctly in the past. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Anything DIY related is what you're gonna find on this channel. So if this video ends up being helpful, please make sure to like. Any questions at all, comment below. And if you want more content like this, please make sure to subscribe. I will be sharing with you the parts I end up using and the tools I end up using. I'll be sharing a link with you of where you can find the same tools and the same parts that I end up using. So you can find those links down in the description below. Now, I have noticed that when I drive this vehicle, there's a little bit of shaking when I'm idling. In other words, I'm at a stoplight or I'm in a drive-through and I'm stopped and the vehicle's in drive. I feel a little bit of shaking. It's not excessive, but it's a familiar feeling that I felt before in other vehicles that needed a spark plug change. So we're gonna see how bad these spark plugs are. I'm expecting them to be pretty bad. All right, so without any further ado, let's get right into this spark plug replacement. All right, so the first thing we need to do is pop the hood. And with this replacement, you can disconnect the battery if you'd like, but I really never have. I've never seen a real need for it. But you can, just to take an extra precaution. Now, there are roughly 5 screws that are holding this engine cover to the rest of the engine. You just need to remove them, and then you'll be able to take off the engine cover. Now, I'm going to be using a 3/8 ratchet, along with an extender for that 3/8 ratchet, along with a 10mm socket. And this 10mm is what we're going to be using essentially for all of the screws that are going to basically detach what we need to detach up until we get to the spark plugs. Once we get to the spark plugs, then we're going to need a different sized deep socket, and it's going to be special for spark plugs. Again, there's going to be a link in the description below. You can simply click on the link and type in the tool that you're missing for this project. You can purchase it, have it coming on the way. All right, so once we have the engine cover removed, we now have access to the ignition coils, which also need to be removed. Each one of them is attached with a 10mm bolt, and so they're very easy to remove. You'll feel it, they'll kind of click out of place, and then you can usually what I do is I'll take the socket. In this case, I switched to a deep socket, and you can just hand loosen it. I like to do it that way just because I don't want to cause any extra friction in there. I'm always very, very careful when it comes to all of these bolts, especially with the spark plugs, because what ends up happening is if you're too rough with it or you tighten them too much or anything like that, you could damage, the thread, and you really don't want to get into having to add the extra task of having to repair a stripped bolt and then as a result a stripped thread. All right, so once all of the ignition coils have been removed, you now have access to the spark plugs. And so what I'm going to be using is a 14mm socket. It's a deep socket, and it's a special socket that has some mechanism inside to hold the spark plug so that once it's totally released after unscrewing, it actually will pick it up. There are other sockets that are magnetic, but this one specifically really ended up working for me. I will be leaving a link down in the description below specifically for this socket because it's a little bit difficult to find if you try searching it up with different names. Here is the spark plug that I ended up getting from the first cylinder. You can see how totally burned up it is and totally needs to be replaced with these brand new Autolite Iridium XP spark plugs. I spent a little bit extra on spark plugs, but I also got a pretty good deal on them. Now, I usually always try to get a higher quality spark plug because I don't want to have to come back and replace it, as often. However, if I do have to replace it still at the same interval, I want them to have performed very well during that time. Now you can see the clear difference here. The old spark plug totally needed to go. Now we have the new spark plug coming in. Remember, there will be a link down in the description below for these spark plugs. I've used them for about 2 weeks now. I'm very happy with the results, and they're a smooth drive, give more power when you're actually driving, and the shaking that I had experienced is virtually gone at this point. So I'm also adding some anti-seize lubrication. That's just so that when it's time for me to replace these again, thinking about the future, they don't end up getting tense and they don't end up seizing up to the point where, again, you want to be very careful when you're removing and placing in new spark plugs, because I don't think I really have to explain to you much as to, if you damage those threads, you've got a whole other project on your hands, and it's not going to be as easy as removing and replacing spark plugs. So here I go, removing all the other spark plugs. There are 4 cylinders, and so we're going to be removing the old spark plugs, 4 old spark plugs, and placing back in 4 new spark plugs. Keeping in mind that when we are replacing them, we are putting some anti-seize lubricant around there, and that's going to allow us to replace them in the future very easily without damage. Also, one thing I make sure to do is I hand tighten it up until I can't anymore. Then I kind of do maybe a 2 or 3 click half pull with the actual ratchet. So it's nothing too tight, but it's tight enough to feel it. Now you can get the exact measurement online as far as how much pressure you actually need to apply when placing in the ratchet. But now moving forward, replacing the ignition coils. These bolts also that I'm going to be replacing, I'm going to be placing some anti-seize on them, because this whole process, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is I'm ensuring that in the future I can come in here and do this again with ease. That's all I'm really focused on when I do this project, because this is something that has to be done pretty regularly. If you miss the intervals, you start to have some issues, and it's a very easy thing to do once you kind of have the tools and get the hang of it. So once all of those 10mm bolts are replaced, you now will be reinstalling the engine cover with those 10mm bolts. There's 5 of them, of course. These don't need to be super tight either, just enough to feel that there's, a good amount of tension. And that's pretty much it. That's all there really is to it. I hope that this video ended up helping you with you actually being able to replace your spark plugs on your Honda or maybe another type of vehicle. And if this video was helpful, please make sure to like. Any questions at all, comment below. And if you want more content like this, please make sure to subscribe. Remember, all the links down in the description below. But that's really all I have for today. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.